There's something nobody tells you about courage, and honestly, it's something most people figure out way too late. Courage isn't what you think it is. We all grew up watching movies where the hero has this moment of clarity, right? Where the music swells and suddenly they know exactly what to do, and they're not afraid anymore, and they just go do the thing. That's not real life. Real courage looks a lot more like a man lying in bed at 3 a.m. doing math in his head. You know the math? He's been at this thing for how long now? 6 months? A year? 3 years? And he's running the numbers on how much further he still has to go and how much time he's already spent and whether any of this is actually going to work out. And the math isn't adding up the way he hoped it would. Maybe that's you right now. Maybe you're that guy staring at the ceiling while your wife's asleep next to you, trying to figure out if you're being persistent or if you're just being stupid. Because here's what nobody tells you. When you're chasing something that matters, there's this point you hit. Let's call it the middle. And the middle is where most men quit. The beginning is easy. The beginning has momentum. You're excited, you're motivated. Everyone's cheering you on. You believe it's going to work. And if you're lucky enough to make it to the end, that's easy too, because you can see it. You're almost there. The finish line is right in front of you. But the middle is brutal. The middle is where the excitement wears off and the results aren't showing up yet, and you're tired and nobody's paying attention anymore. And that voice in your head starts asking really reasonable questions. Like, what if this doesn't work out? What if you're wasting your time? What if you're the exception? What if everyone else who succeeded had something you don't have? And that voice, it sounds exactly like wisdom. It sounds responsible. It sounds mature. It's not telling you to quit. It's just saying maybe it's time to be realistic. Maybe it's time to pivot. Maybe you gave it a shot and that's enough. And most men listen to that voice because it makes sense. There was a guy a few years back building something he really believed in. About 8 months in, and nothing was happening. He was putting in the work every single day, but the scoreboard wasn't moving. And he remembers sitting in his car after work one day, just completely exhausted, thinking, you know what? Maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe it's time to let it go. He was this close to quitting, but then something shifted. He heard someone say, courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is just deciding that something matters more than your fear. And he thought about that for a long time because he was afraid, terrified actually, terrified that he was wasting his life, terrified that he'd look back in 10 years and regret all the time he spent on this thing that didn't work out. But then he realized something. The fear of failing hurt. But you know what hurt more? The idea of quitting and spending the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if he just kept going. And that's when he understood what courage actually is. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is just not quitting today. That's it. That's the whole thing. You don't need the courage to finish. You don't need the courage to succeed. You just need the courage to not quit today. Tomorrow can worry about itself. And I know that sounds too simple. I know it sounds like one of those motivational poster things. But think about it. When you're in the middle and you're looking at the entire mountain you still have to climb, it's overwhelming. Like, how am I supposed to do all of that? But if you just think, okay, what's one thing I can do today? Just one thing, suddenly it's manageable. Maybe today you send one email. Maybe you make one call. Maybe you write one page. Maybe you just show up when staying in bed would have been easier. That's courage. That's the game. Because here's what most men don't realize. Every single day you don't quit. You're building something. And it's not what you think. You think you're building the business or the body or the career or whatever your goal is. And sure, you're working on that. But that's not the most important thing you're building. The most important thing you're building is evidence. Evidence for yourself that you're the kind of person who doesn't quit. Evidence that you can take a hit and keep moving. Evidence that your word to yourself actually means something. And that evidence, that's what makes a man dangerous. Right now, you might not feel like someone who can do hard things, but you are. You just don't have enough evidence yet. But every day you show up, especially on the days when you don't want to, you're adding to the pile, and eventually that pile gets big enough that you can't ignore it anymore. You look at it and you think, oh, I actually am that person. I actually am someone who keeps going. And once you have that, once you really believe that about yourself, everything changes. Because now when something hard comes up, you don't spiral into doubt. You just think, well, I've done hard things before. I can do this too. That's the shift. That's what we're actually building here. There's a man who's been working on the same goals since 2019. Some of them worked out, some of them didn't. Some of them are still in progress, but here's what he knows now. He's not the same person he was back then. That version of him, sitting in the car, thinking about quitting, he was scared. He was unsure. He didn't know if he could do it. The version of him today, he's still scared sometimes. He's still unsure sometimes, but he knows he can do it because he has years of evidence now. Years of not quitting, years of showing up, years of doing the thing even when he didn't feel like it. And that changes everything. So if you're in the middle right now, if you're tired, if you're scared, if you're wondering whether any of this is worth it, here's what you need to understand. You don't have to figure out the whole path. You don't have to know how it's all going to work out. You don't have to feel motivated or inspired or confident. You just have to not quit today, just today. That's all. And look, it doesn't get easier. The weight doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger. But here's what does happen. You start to trust yourself in a way you never did before. Because you've been tested and you didn't break. And now you know something about yourself that you didn't know before. You know that when things get hard, you don't run, you don't hide, you don't quit, you just keep going. And that knowledge, that's worth more than the goal itself. Because goals are great, but they're external. They depend on markets and timing and luck and all kinds of things you can't control. But who you become in pursuit of the goal, that's yours. Nobody can take that away from you. So here's what needs to happen. Tonight, before you go to sleep, you need to make a promise. Not to anyone else, to yourself. Promise yourself that you won't quit tomorrow. Not forever, just tomorrow. You can revisit the decision the day after if you want, but tomorrow you're showing up. And then when tomorrow comes, make the same promise. Just one more day, because that's how mountains get climbed. You don't do it all at once. You just take one step, and then another step, and then another step. Yes, some days you'll take 3 steps. Some days you'll barely take half a step. That's fine. What matters is that you're moving forward, even if it's slow, even if it's messy, even if nobody's watching. Because the person you're becoming, the person who keeps their word to themselves, even when it's hard, that person is being built right now, in these exact moments when you want to quit and you don't. And 5 years from now, when you look back at this season, you won't remember the days when everything was easy. You'll remember this day, the day you wanted to quit and you chose to keep going instead. That's the day that mattered. That's the day that made you. So don't quit today. The future version of you, the one who's stronger and more capable and more certain, he's waiting to see if you'll show up. Show up. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be something. One step today. That's the game. That's courage. And it's enough.